Hello there, this is MTG Degree, and today I wanted to do one more video about the Amonkhet pre-release. Today we're going to go a little bit deeper into the tips and tricks because this set is very complicated, and so I know that people are going to be making some mistakes, or there's a lot of edges that you can find by knowing the mechanics really well. So the first mechanic that I like to go over is Exert. Now it's not too complicated, but I know that I'm going to see some people making this goofy mistake, which is when you exert, you're going to want to alpha strike, like attack with everything, right? And that can be totally fine. The thing about Exert though, if you alpha strike with Exert and most of your creatures are exerted, remember that they don't untap. Now that doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but if you exert and swing out and none of your stuff untaps and then they don't die, they get to hit you back twice before your stuff untaps to protect you again. So please make sure that if you alpha strike with Exert, that you are actually going to kill them when that happens. Next up, let's look at -1/-1 counters. Now in green and black, you've got a lot of -1/-1 counters, but they're coming down on your own creatures. Now this is confusing for a lot of people, and it's hard to see how you get the value out of that. So let's go into how to make great -1/-1 decks. Now, one card that you really need to keep your eye out for, even though it's a rare, is Chandler Initiate. This thing is complete destruction in these decks, because what you can do is, when these cards come into play, they say put -1/-1 counters on a target creature. Now, a lot of them assume that you're just going to put it on the creature that's coming into play. But if you put it on Chandler Initiate instead, then he can just tap for mana and then just get rid of -1/-1 counters for you. So all of your creatures are just undercosted huge monsters, as long as you're just dumping a bunch of -1/-1 counters on Chandler Initiate. It is extremely strong. It is so strong, in fact, that you should be tapping Chandler Initiate for mana when you have nothing to cast, just at the end of your opponent's turn, because you just want to get it ready to get more -1/-1 counters. In the same vein, you can use Exemplar of Strength as a -1/-1 counter dump. If you just put a bunch of -1/-1 counters on this thing and you get to attacking, it removes those -1/-1 counters, gives you a little bit of life. It's a very exciting card. Now, how do you get it to attack? Well, there's some creatures that allow creatures with power 2 or less to attack. There's the blue cartouche. Get inventive, but this can be a great way for you to just get all your creatures really huge. Lastly, if you're lucky and open a Decimator Beetle, this thing is insane and will allow you to remove lots of -1/-1 counters, put them on your enemy's creatures. I mean, true decimation is going to occur here. Now, what if you just need something that you don't really need to take the -1/-1 counters off of? Well, I suggest Soul Stinger. Now, this card's very interesting because you can just dump -1/-1 counters on it, make all the creatures that are coming into play big, and when Soul Stinger dies, it's going to kill something by transferring all of its -1/-1 counters onto opponent's creature. Now, the cool thing about Soul Stinger, something that I think most people aren't going to get right away, and you are going to get right away because you're watching this video, is that you can put more -1/-1 counters on it than it has toughness. So if you have it so that it's just barely alive, it only has 1 toughness left, and then you dump 2 or 3 -1/-1 counters, all of them come on at once. Then it dies, and when it dies, it says how many -1/-1 counters are on me. So you can actually make it take out something really huge by dumping more -1/-1 counters on it than it has toughness, which is a really cool case for you to use. Another great card for you to do this kind of thing on is Defiant Greatmaw. As you dump -1/-1 counters on it, it makes your other creatures bigger, and then maybe you need a way to take those -1/-1 counters off. Well, in my opinion, Shed Weakness is amazing in a green-black deck. If you're doing the -1/-1 counter thing, Shed Weakness is going to be great for you. Next up, let's talk about Embalm. Now, Embalm is a big part of this set. Of course, we've got a lot of mummies running around. Now, the 2 cards that I wanted to bring up are Angler Drake and Gale Strike. Now, when you're in the Embalm mirror, you know, you're both playing a bunch of Embalm creatures, you're going to want to put in as many Angler Drakes and Gale Strikes into your deck as you basically can, because Gale Strike and Angler Drake just kill an Embalm creature when they come into play. They just pop that token right out of existence. Now the other thing with Embalm is that you are trying to get a lot of value over the long term. If you're playing against an Exert player, somebody who's just trying to kill you dead, then you might have a hard time living that long. Now a good way to live for a while and to get that Embalm value running as quickly as possible is with Naga Oracle. This is a good blocker for a lot of those tiny creatures that are exerting. You know, some of them just get to 3 power and stuff, so you'll be able to block them quite easily. So this gives you a blocker, and it sets up by throwing a lot of Embalm creatures into the graveyard, some more value down the line. Lastly, I want to talk about cycling. Now, a lot of cards in this set have cycling. It's a huge part of the set. But what I think is going to happen to some people, and I don't want you to be this person, is for you to become allergic to missing land drops. Missing land drops is really a part of Magic, and if you're not getting overrun and stuff, consider twice whether or not you should be cycling to try to hit a land drop. First of all, you're still doing nothing for that turn probably because you seem to need something to do. And if you're paying mana to cycle, then you're still not going to have enough mana to do anything. And you're turning in what is actually a card. At that time, you have a card in your hand, and you are turning it into maybe a land, maybe another card. Now, card advantage in Limited is very, very important. Just playing more cards than your opponent tends to win games. So for you to take cards and just turn them into lands or try to turn them into lands is not necessarily something that you want to be doing. So yes, I'm not saying that cycling is awful, but I am saying that you shouldn't just do it because you can do it all the time, which I think a lot of people are going to do. They're just going to cycle every time that they would miss a land drop. So with that said, I hope that this kind of overview of the mechanics, especially that deep look into -1/-1 synergies, has been useful for you. Please go out there and completely destroy your pre-release. That would be awesome. But if you don't, still have a good time. You're just playing Magic, it's going to be great. And as always, I'll see you next video.